I still remember the exact tone of her voice when she said it. Not angry, not shaking. Calm, measured, like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror until it sounded reasonable. "Dad, I need you to understand something," she said, folding her arms the way she used to when she was a teenager trying to sound grown. "If you can't accept my husband, then I can't have you in my life anymore." The room went quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind where even the walls seemed to lean in and listen. Someone cleared their throat behind me. A glass clinked against a plate. And suddenly, every eye in that living room was waiting for my response. Before I go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? Because what I chose to do in that moment still divides people to this day. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask her to repeat herself, though part of me hoped I'd misheard. Instead, I looked at her face and realized something unsettling. This wasn't a conversation. It was a verdict. She wasn't asking me to get to know her husband better. She wasn't asking for patience or time. She was asking for unconditional acceptance. No questions, no concerns, no honesty. And if I couldn't give that, she was ready to erase me from her life. I asked her one question. Just one. "What exactly do you mean by accept?" She hesitated, just for a second, and that hesitation told me more than her answer ever could. "It means supporting us," she said quickly. "Being positive, not making things uncomfortable, not looking at him like that." "Like what?" I wanted to ask. Like a father who notices patterns? Like a man who's lived long enough to recognize when something isn't right? But I didn't say any of that. I nodded slowly instead, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable again. I could feel it pressing against her patience. "You've never liked him," she added, sharper now. "You've never really tried." That wasn't true, and she knew it. I had welcomed him into my home, paid for dinners, listened more than I spoke, swallowed my concerns when I saw the way he talked over her, corrected her in public, brushed off questions with jokes that weren't quite jokes. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point at and say, "There, that's the problem." Just small things, quiet things, the kind of things people only notice when they're paying attention. And apparently, paying attention had become my crime. "I'm not asking you to choose," she said, her voice rising just enough for the room to hear. "I'm asking you to respect my marriage." There it was, the reframing. If I disagreed, I was disrespectful. If I hesitated, I was unsupportive. If I spoke honestly, I was attacking. I glanced at her husband for the first time since the conversation started. He didn't look at me, not directly. He stared at his phone, thumb scrolling slowly, as if this had nothing to do with him, as if the ultimatum being delivered in his name wasn't his idea. That was the part that chilled me. He didn't need to speak. She was doing it for him. I thought about all the years before this moment, teaching her how to ride a bike, sitting in uncomfortable chairs during school plays, driving across town at midnight when her car broke down, being the one she called when things fell apart. And now I was being told my place in her life depended on my ability to stay silent. "I won't pretend," I said quietly. She frowned. "Pretend what?" "That I don't see what I see." Her expression hardened instantly. "See? This is exactly what I'm talking about." The room shifted. Someone sighed. Someone else looked away. The pressure was no longer subtle. It was deliberate now. "So that's it," she said. "You're really going to do this? You're really going to choose your opinions over me?" There was again the trap. If I stood my ground, I was choosing against her. If I gave in, I was choosing against myself. I felt something settle in my chest then. Not anger, not fear. Clarity. "I love you," I said, "but I won't lie to keep access to you." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected that answer, as if she'd assumed I would panic, beg, apologize, say whatever was needed to make this uncomfortable moment go away. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "This is your last chance." The word last echoed longer than it should have. I looked around the room one more time, at the people who had watched her grow up, at the faces that knew me as her father, not as a problem to be managed. I realized something painful and freeing all at once. This wasn't about acceptance. It was about control. I won't accept an ultimatum disguised as love, I said calmly. Her jaw tightened. Her husband finally looked up. And that was the moment I knew, whatever happened next, there was no going back. She picked up her phone, thumbs moving fast, and said the words that were meant to scare me into obedience. Then, don't bother calling me anymore. I watched her turn away, and I understood with absolute certainty that the real consequences of this decision hadn't even begun yet. I didn't leave right away. For a few seconds after she turned away, I just stood there, hands at my sides, feeling the weight of something final settle into the room. Conversations didn't resume. No one rushed to smooth things over. People avoided my eyes, the way they do when they sense a line has been crossed and no one knows how to step back. I picked up my coat slowly, not dramatically, not in protest, just the same way I'd done it 1,000 times before. Habit is a strange comfort in moments like that. As I walked toward the door, I waited for her to stop me, to say my name the way she used to when she was scared, to ask me to sit back down so we could talk this through. She didn't. That silence followed me all the way to my car. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light gave my thoughts time to catch up to what had just happened. I replayed the moment again and again, not looking for something clever I should have said, but trying to understand how we'd arrived here. At what point does a daughter learn to turn love into leverage? That night, my phone stayed quiet. No angry texts. No dramatic follow-ups. Just nothing. And somehow, that felt heavier than any argument. The next morning, I woke up early out of habit, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table where she'd once done homework, tapping her pencil against the wood while asking me questions she already knew the answers to. I checked my phone. Still nothing. By the second day, the quiet had started to feel intentional, not absent strategy. I recognized it because I'd seen it before. Silence as punishment. Distance as a tool. On the third day, the message finally came. It wasn't long. I hope you had time to think. I meant what I said. No greeting. No warmth. Just a reminder of the threat. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, ready to type the response she was expecting. Something soft. Something apologetic. Something that would restore order by placing all the blame neatly back on me. And I almost did it. Before I go any further, let me ask you something. What would you have typed in that moment? Would you have chosen peace, even if it meant swallowing your truth? Comment below, because that choice isn't as simple as people pretend. Instead of replying, I set the phone down and opened a notebook I hadn't touched in years. Not because I wanted to build a case, but because I needed clarity. I started writing down moments. Small ones. Easy to dismiss if you weren't paying attention. The way her husband corrected her stories mid-sentence. The jokes at my expense that always landed a little too sharp. The way disagreements somehow always turned into loyalty tests. As I wrote, a pattern emerged, one I couldn't ignore anymore. Every time I'd voiced even the mildest concern, she responded the same way. By pulling away. Shorter calls. Canceled plans. Cold politeness replacing warmth. I'd always backed off, afraid of pushing too hard. That fear had taught her something dangerous. That access to her could be used as a weapon. Later that afternoon, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. Someone who'd known my daughter since she was little. After the usual pleasantries, she hesitated, then said quietly, "She seems different lately." I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't need to. The comment confirmed what I'd already been feeling. That evening, another message arrived. If you can't be supportive, it's better we take space. Space. Such a gentle word for something so sharp. I typed one sentence. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Each version sounded either defensive or conciliatory, and neither felt honest. Finally, I sent this. I won't pretend things are fine when they aren't. But I'm not cutting you off. That choice is yours. I stared at the screen after hitting send, aware that I'd just stepped off the path she'd laid out for me. The response came almost immediately. "So you're really choosing this?" Choosing what? I wondered. Integrity? Reality? Myself? I didn't reply. The days that followed were harder than I expected. Not because I doubted my decision, but because the consequences were quiet. No explosions, no dramatic fallout. Just a slow realization that my place in her life had been put on hold until I complied. Friends asked why they hadn't seen her around. Family gatherings happened without me being invited. I heard things secondhand, filtered, softened versions of events where I was described as stubborn and unwilling to move on. What they didn't say was that I'd been given an ultimatum. One evening, I received a call from a relative, well-meaning but uneasy. "You know how she is," they said. "Maybe you could just let this go?" Let what go? The truth? I thanked them and ended the call. That night, I realized something important. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the example I was setting. About whether love meant teaching someone they could threaten their way into agreement. Weeks passed. Then small things began to change. I noticed her name mentioned less often. Invitations to gatherings became awkward affairs, with people unsure who would show up. Mutual friends seemed uncomfortable, caught between loyalty and curiosity. I heard, quietly at first, that things weren't as perfect as they'd appeared, that arguments had increased, that stress had crept in where certainty once lived. Without my steady presence, there was no one left to question anything. And then one evening my phone rang. Her name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring, my heart beating a little faster than I wanted to admit. When it stopped, I sat there, staring at the darkened screen, knowing whatever came next would change the shape of everything, because I could feel it. The silence was breaking. I let the phone sit there for a full minute after it stopped ringing, not because I was trying to punish her, but because I needed to be sure of something first. I needed to know that if I answered, I wouldn't slip back into the old role, the one where I rushed to fix things just because silence felt unbearable. When I finally called her back, she answered on the first ring. "Dad," she said quickly, like she was afraid I'd hang up. "I didn't think you'd call." I said I wouldn't cut you off. I replied, "I meant it." There was a pause. I could hear breathing on the other end, slower than before. "Careful. I just want to check in," she said. "Things have been a lot." I didn't ask what she meant. I let her fill the space herself. "We're under a lot of pressure," she continued. "Everyone keeps asking questions, and it's exhausting having to explain things." Explain what? I wondered. The truth she'd buried, or the story she'd told to keep control? "I didn't realize how much you helped smooth things over," she added. "People listen to you." That was the first crack. Not an apology, not accountability, but an admission that my presence had mattered more than she'd wanted to admit. "I never tried to undermine you," I said gently. "I tried to steady things." She exhaled sharply. That's not how it felt. "Feelings aren't facts," I said, then softened my tone. "But they still deserve to be examined." The line went quiet again. "I don't want to fight," she said finally. "I just want things to go back to how they were." There it was, the wish to rewind without changing anything. "I can't do that," I replied, because how things were required me to stay silent. Her voice tightened. "So what, you want me to choose?" "No," I said. "I want you to stop forcing everyone else to." She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was smaller. "You don't understand how hard this is for me." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. I'd heard that sentence so many times in my life, usually right before I was expected to give something up. "I understand more than you think," I said, "but I won't pretend fear is the same as love." She ended the call soon after, politely, carefully, like someone walking across thin ice. For a while after that, things hovered in an uneasy balance. We spoke occasionally. Short calls, neutral topics, weather, work, nothing real. And yet, even in that fragile peace, I could feel something building underneath. Friends started reaching out, not to confront me, but to ask gentle questions. "Are you okay? Is everything all right between you and her?" People were noticing the distance. One afternoon, I ran into her husband unexpectedly at a local store. He nodded at me like we were acquaintances, not family. No hostility, no warmth either, just distance. "Everything good?" he asked casually. I studied his face. calm, unbothered, as if nothing had been set in motion. For now, I replied. He smiled thinly and walked away. That night, my daughter called again. This time, she didn't ease into it. He feels like you don't respect him, she said, and it's affecting our marriage. There it was, the blame shifting back into place. I've never disrespected him, I replied. I've just refused a lie. She sighed, frustrated. Why can't you just say you're sorry and move on? Why is this the hill you want to die on? I didn't answer immediately. I thought about all the times I'd apologized just to keep things calm. All the times I'd swallowed words because I was afraid of losing her. Because if I do that, I said slowly, I teach you that love means surrendering your reality. She snapped back. You're overthinking this. No, I said, I'm finally thinking clearly. Her tone changed then. Sharper, defensive. If you can't support us, maybe you shouldn't be involved at all. There was again the threat dressed up as self-care. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Resolve. I won't be pushed out of your life, I said. But I won't be pulled into silence either. She didn't reply. The next few weeks were tense. I heard through others that arguments at home had become more frequent, that stress was showing, that the certainty she'd once worn like armor was cracking. I didn't interfere. I didn't comment. I didn't swoop in to help. And that, I think, is when things really started to unravel. Without an outside voice grounding her, every disagreement echoed louder. Without someone willing to question things gently, everything became absolute, loyal or disloyal, with us or against us. One evening, she showed up at my door unannounced. She looked tired, not dramatic tired, the kind that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. I didn't come to argue, she said quickly. I just needed to talk. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Why couldn't you just accept him? She asked quietly. For me, I leaned back and looked at her, really looked at her, the daughter I loved, the woman struggling to hold something together by force. Because acceptance that requires silence isn't acceptance, I said. It's compliance. Her eyes filled just slightly. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. Sometimes hard is honest, I replied. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You're going to lose me, she said, her voice trembling now. Is that really worth it? I didn't answer right away, because I knew what I was about to say would either end this or change everything. I didn't answer her right away, not because I didn't know what to say, but because once I said it, there would be no way to soften the truth afterward. She stood there waiting, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes shining with frustration, and something else beneath it. Fear. Real fear. The kind people hide behind ultimatums when they feel control slipping away. I'm not trying to lose you, I said finally. I'm trying to stop losing myself. She shook her head, pacing the length of the kitchen like she used to when she was a teenager and overwhelmed. You keep making this about you. No, I replied quietly. You made it about me when you asked me to lie. She stopped pacing, looked at me as if I'd struck something fragile. She didn't know how to defend. He says you judge him, she said, almost pleading now, that you've never really accepted him. I thought back to all the dinners where I'd listened more than I spoke. All the times I'd changed the subject to avoid tension. All the moments I'd chosen peace over honesty, until peace started costing too much. I don't judge him, I said. I observe him. That landed harder than any accusation. She stared at the floor. You don't understand what it's like living with someone who feels constantly questioned. And you don't understand what it's like watching your child shrink to keep someone else comfortable. I replied. The room felt smaller then, like the walls had leaned closer. She sat back down slowly, her shoulders slumping. If you would just accept him, everything would calm down. That sentence told me everything. Not if he changed. Not if things improved. If I complied. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. What happens the next time I notice something that worries me? She didn't answer. And the time after that, I pressed. How many times do I have to stay silent to keep my place in your life? Her voice broke. I don't know. That honesty cracked something open. I raised you to stand on your own, I said gently, not to build your life on demands. She looked up at me then, eyes wet. You think I'm being manipulated. I think you're being pressured. I corrected, and I think you're passing that pressure on to me. She stood again, restless. So what am I supposed to do? That question carried weight. It wasn't an ultimatum anymore. It was uncertainty. I'm not telling you what to do, I said. I'm telling you what I won't do. She folded her arms again, defensive instinct returning. So you're just going to let this tear us apart? No, I replied. I'm going to let the truth surface. That's the only thing that actually holds. She scoffed weakly. Truth doesn't keep families together. I met her eyes. Neither does fear. She didn't stay much longer after that. She hugged me stiffly, like someone hugging a stranger, and walked out without looking back. For the next few weeks, I heard nothing. No calls, no texts, no updates filtered through family. It was like she'd vanish again, only this time without the sharpness of a threat. Just absence. I won't lie. There were moments I doubted myself. Late nights when the house felt too quiet. Mornings when I caught myself reaching for the phone before remembering there was no one on the other end waiting. But something else happened too. I felt lighter. Not happy. Not relieved. But steady. Like I'd finally stopped bracing for the next emotional demand. Then the stories started trickling in. Arguments at home. Tension that wouldn't ease. Friends stepping back. Uncomfortable with the atmosphere around them. The certainty she'd once clung to began to erode. Without someone outside the situation to absorb blame or smooth things over, everything stayed exposed. And exposure has consequences. One evening, a mutual acquaintance called me, hesitating before speaking. I don't know if I should say this, they said, but she's been asking about you. I didn't respond. She keeps saying she doesn't understand how things got this bad. I thanked them and hung up. That night, I sat at the same kitchen table where we'd spoken weeks earlier and realized something important. I hadn't lost my daughter. I'd lost my role as her shield. And that role had been protecting more than it should have. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message I hadn't expected. Can we meet? Just the two of us. No demands. No conditions. No ultimatums. Just a question. I stared at the screen, aware that how I answered would determine whether the story ended in reconciliation or in a lesson she might finally understand. Because whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. This time, I wouldn't be the one bending. I agreed to meet her the next afternoon, not because I was eager, and not because I was afraid of losing her again, but because this time, the request didn't come wrapped in pressure. It came without conditions. And that alone told me something had shifted. We met at a small cafe halfway between our houses. Neutral ground, a place with no history attached to it. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting by the window, staring at her coffee like it might give her answers if she waited long enough. She stood when she saw me, hesitated, then sat back down. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I nodded and took the seat across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of conversation around us filled the silence, giving her time to gather whatever courage she had left. "I didn't realize how much I'd turned everything into a test," she said finally. I didn't interrupt. I didn't reassure her. I let her finish. "I thought if everyone just fell in line, things would calm down," she continued. "I thought loyalty meant making people choose." Her voice cracked on the last word. "That's not loyalty," I said gently. "That's fear asking to be obeyed."